Hi, everyone, and welcome to Author of Your Own Stories Daily Growth Hack Show. I am your host, Doug Holt, and I'm very excited to have Ben here with us, Ben Reuter. Ben is a faculty member at California University of Pennsylvania, and of course, he's a lot more than just that, or he wouldn't be here. He's an exercise physiologist who holds certifications from the National Strength and Conditioning Association and the National Athletic Trainers Association. He has interest in injury prevention, performance enhancement for endurance athletes, and using movement to enhance quality of life. After his travels through Pennsylvania, Virginia, Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida for school and work, he has been in the Pittsburgh area since 2004. Ben is an active contributor to his profession with work on a variety of committees of the NSCA, as well as presentations and publications, both nationally and internationally. The idea for moving to live came from his interest in listening to long-form movement-related podcasts that were directed either towards professionals or general public. Now, it should be noted that Moving to Live is one of Ben's podcast shows, which he's been producing for quite a while, and I highly recommend it. Not only that, Ben actually podcasts out of a red room, which we may talk about in a little bit. So, Ben, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here, Doug. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. So you and I have connected a number of times, and obviously as someone who's been in the fitness space for over 2 decades, your accolades are up there as high as anybody's that are in the industry. Where did you get started with your journey? Give us kind of a short synopsis and fill us in the blanks.
I think probably the first place I was aware that there was something related to fitness or movement or exercise, I think we have a bad name for that, so I'm just going to call it movement, was when I was a junior in high school and sprained my ankle. I went to a very small school. We didn't have athletic trainers. And one of my teachers said, "Hey, you need to go to this sports medicine clinic in Oneonta, New York." That was about 15 miles from my home. I went there and had an experience with the co-owner who was an athletic trainer. You'll see a trend here. When I found out there was a profession of athletic training, it's like, ooh, I think I want to do that. And his comment was, don't be an athletic trainer, be a physical therapist and get the athletic training certification because it opens up more doors for you.
Okay.
I didn't listen to him.
As most people that age don't, right?
I wanted to work with athletes because I realized I wasn't going to be good enough to be a high-level athlete for a long period of time. So I went to school and my goals were either marine biology or athletic training. And it turns out that my first class was a plant biology class, which I hated. And my work study class was in the athletic training room.
Gotcha.
That kind of allowed me to go through school and become an athletic trainer. But I was always looking for more. It was always kind of the idea, just like the runner who starts out, they do a 5K and it's like, can I do a 10K? Can I do a 15K? They're looking for, where's the point where they say, okay, that's it. I can't do anymore. And I think to some extent that was me with education. I jokingly describe myself as a pseudo Renaissance man. I have lots of interests, but I excel at nothing. So anything that I take on, I want to be reasonably competent in. So after working as an athletic trainer, I had a number of people who say, you ought to get your doctorate. And one of the people who told me to do this really encouraged me and had an impact on my life. And so I went back after working for 3 or 4 years after graduate school and got a doctorate. Throughout this whole time, I was active. I always did some sort of personal training on the side because I firmly believed that if I was going to teach something, I also wanted to be a practitioner. And it seems that everything that I take on occurs because of something that happened or things that I did 10 or 15 years ago. So I've had the opportunity to do some writing for a number of professional books for professional organizations. And that came from one of my first jobs where a mentor of mine essentially said, "Hey, I know you want to write. Your name's not going to be on this, but you can help do the second and third versions of this particular article." So I think the take-home message or what my story is, I've always done something related to movement, but I'm also innately curious and I'm constantly looking for the next thing that I find really, really interesting.
Oh, awesome. Well,
from athletic training.
Go ahead, Ben.
I'm saying from athletic training to exercise science to teaching to podcasting to who knows what's next. I think you and I were talking, you saying, well, you're starting almost with a mini multimedia company.
Yeah, maybe even more than many. You have quite a bit. And another thing that I find interesting in your story that caught my attention is you were saying like, look, these things, these opportunities that are coming up for me are things that kind of that came out of planting seeds or things from 10, 15 years ago. And that's one of the advantages of having a wide breadth of interests and knowledge and doing well in so many different areas, even if you're not the best, so to speak. And although I think a lot of people are going to debate that with you, because I think you might be the best in a lot of these areas. But really what's happening is, and you hear this so much from the people that are listening, is it's not working. I've been trying this for a month. It's not, I'm not getting the opportunities that Ben's getting. And yet what you're doing is you keep building and building and building, following your passions. And then as a farmer plants the seeds, you're starting to reap the rewards many years later.
I think that's a good point. And the interesting thing is I've never realized until maybe 2 or 3 years ago that I was following my passions. And I was at a professional conference, and there was a friend of mine from undergrad who I hadn't seen in 20 plus years who recognized my voice. And after talking to her for a few minutes and, catching up, she says, "Oh, I always knew you would do things that you were passionate about." So I guess even back in college when I was much shyer than I am now and not quite as outspoken, it showed through to some people.
It's amazing. And I can definitely see that when we've talked offline, again, I said this, we could talk for hours, because you do have such a wide breadth of knowledge and interests, and you can speak well on all of them. So when we're talking about kind of things going on in the profession, so to speak, but talking to people that are listening to this, what are some of the current trends that you're seeing within movement?
I think one of the big trends, and I think it's been a big trend for probably 10 years, and it's getting more and more common, are wearables. I know your colleague Eric Malzone and I have geeked out on this.
Mm-hmm.
And some people, the more active athletes, the people who are more serious about it, have been using things like heart rate monitors for 25, 30 years. Maybe 6 or 7 years ago, it started to get more reasonably priced and easy to use because of the software for people who just wanted to be active or understood that movement enhanced their quality of life, even if they weren't, quote unquote, practicing athletes. And we can talk more about what a definition of an athlete is. And you've seen really in the last year or so, these devices that allow people not necessarily to measure performance, but measure the quality of their sleep, measure the quality of their recovery, and measure the effects that different stressors in their life have. I had the good fortune on one of my podcasts to talk a couple of times to a guy named Don Moxley, and he's kind of the practical guru of heart rate variability. And his comment is, all these recovery mechanisms or all these factors involved in recovery, this is what things like HRV and monitoring sleep are good for. Because if you're a businessman and you've got stresses because you're fighting with your wife or your kid's not doing well in school, that translates over into your professional career, that translates over into your relationships. So I think these wearables give us the tools. We still have to figure out how exactly to use them to potentially enhance the quality of our life by recognizing what's a stressor and what's not a stressor. I know I've done some of the blog posts that you've made. Your stressor is you like to drive across the country, but then you realize I still have to work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So step one, I think, with these wearables, and I think why this is a big hit and very popular, is it can allow people to identify what are the things that prevent them from potentially being more successful in life.
Well, so you're saying I can't segment my life into categories and that the stress at home is going to carry over into the business? That's crazy.
I know it's one of those things. It's like, well, I know that pertains to everybody. And I remember, but it doesn't pertain to me. I remember my freshman year in college, my first 2 semesters, I was a 1.889, a 2.1 and a 1.889 for GPAs. So it wasn't very good. I had no classes I was interested in, but I still remember sitting in my advisor's office and him telling me that I needed to start keeping a calendar and a notebook for all of the things that were going on in my life, because I was trying to play soccer. I was in the band. I was working as an athletic training student. I was taking classes. And I still remember as clear as a bell saying, "Oh, I can understand why you need to do that, but I can keep it all in my head." and now, whether it's in my personal life or it's in my professional life, if somebody asks me to do something or asks me to be available for something, I tell them, email me or text me. Then it's my responsibility. And I think what I've learned is I can't segment my life, but what I can do is get the information all in one spot, whether it's by Google Calendar or my list of text messages, so that maybe I can control the other areas. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that people miss out on, where they may realize intuitively, okay, I can't segment my life, but there's so many options out there. They're not sure, what can I do to recognize that they all interact, and what can I do to control it? Because everybody's got their magic idea.
Yeah. Oh, it's we talk about this often on the show, of this idea of segmenting your life. And we hear often from business owners who say, well, I can separate, what's going on at home from my work life. And, sure. Yeah, and it never works out quite that way. So I love what you're saying. So with this idea of measuring stressors and stressors in life, are you seeing people actually using this and then using that to modify behavior? Is that what people are thinking about doing?
As I mentioned, I do a little personal training in addition to my other things, and I've gotten a couple of my clients to start using heart rate variability. And I'm fortunate that I have some pretty intelligent clients. The one I'm thinking of in particular is an engineer, and he's gone down the rabbit hole as I have, as far as, well, when I do this, if I don't get a lot of sleep, this is what happens. Or he travels a little bit for work. It's like, when I change 3 time zones, my sleep quality is affected. So I think what you've got is although everybody, if you walk into even a Starbucks, you'll probably see 50% of the people wearing some sort of a wristband. I'm not going to name brands just because there's literally hundreds out there.
Yes.
But then you've got all of those really look at measuring activity. And I think you'd agree with me, if there's a way that we can make movement more of a lifestyle rather than an activity, we're going to help our overall health and quality of life. But I think now with the wearables, as the technology is improving, now you're starting to see, okay, we know moving is important, but recognizing what's happening outside of that with the stressors is important. And it's actually, as I'm talking to you, I'll hold it up so you can see, I'm in day 4 of the Oura Ring, which I knew wasn't going to do a very good job for measuring movement, because all along it's designed for sleep quality and measuring recovery. And I'm not getting paid by them, but so far I am amazed at the info that I'm getting on my quality of sleep. I knew my sleep wasn't super, super good. I've got an epileptic dog, so if she moves at night, I go bolt upright and go, oh my God, is she having a seizure? But now I actually have real graphs that show me, it's like, oh yeah, when I woke up, then I can see my heart rate spiked. So I don't know what the solution is, but now I have identified what the problem is and can hopefully take steps to adapt my behavior. So maybe it's a better quality sleep, which I think is going to integrate throughout my life.
There you go. Well, yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that product, because I've actually probably half a dozen high-end business owners. And I say high-end, so they're taking home multiple millions of dollars. Companies are much higher, and they all have got the Ring. And I've asked them how they feel. And the question always to me is, great, you've recognized the behavior, that's step 1, but how are you going to then modify to mitigate those issues with sleep? Supplementation, are you changing your sleep habits and hygiene, and things along those lines? Have you recognized anything that you'll be changing?
One of the things that I've changed, it's kind of been a combination thing. Movement has always been a big part of my life, but I kind of took it for granted. And I've had all of my life an eye that's extremely nearsighted. And I was told at some point in my life, you're going to have a detached retina. Don't worry about it. These are the signs and symptoms. And about 3.5 years ago, it happened, and it turned into a physics problem. The retina kept detaching. So in the course of about 2.5 years, I had 10 plus surgeries and 16 plus procedures, each of them repairing the retinal tear in a different place. And suddenly I wasn't able to move as much as I normally did. And what I took for granted wasn't possible.
Wow.
So then I jumped back into wanting to thinking, okay, I'm an athlete, I'm active, and going back to the same level, even though I hadn't done stuff. And I ended up herniating a disc in my back, which set me back further. So with the slow recovery, it was kind of a recognition. And the first thing was, okay, for me, a priority in my life, what makes me settled is I need to get out 5 or 6 days a week doing some sort of aerobic exercise. That's kind of my happy place. Mm-hmm. And then I've kind of adapted that more, is if I can get on the bike 2 or 3 days a week, my back feels better, because the disc is fine, but I've got some degenerative diseases and I'm little bit over 50. So, there's some arthritis there. Then it came from that, and I started using, again, shameless plug, but I'm not getting paid. I started using SteadyMD for my family practice physician. And after getting some blood test results, I started tracking my diet first for 3 days to get an idea of what it was like for the physician. And now I've been going on it for about 4.5 months. And it makes me very aware of not only calories, but for me, enough protein. So the changes that I've made, especially since getting the ring and even before the ring, using the Elite HRV app to measure my HRV in the morning, was if I don't get it 190 to 210 calories of protein a day, my next day's sleep is affected.
Interesting. So I'm not familiar with that product. I'm sure a lot of the listeners aren't either. What is that?
The Elite HRV?
Not the Elite HRV, but the MD.
SteadyMD. SteadyMD, they don't like to call it concierge medicine because that has an elitist attitude. But what it is it's telemedicine for active people.
Okay.
You can get on, if you Google SteadyMD, I'm going to butcher his name, so I'm going to go what he's pronounced by. My current physician that I've been very happy with is Dr. Spencer. Spencer's his first name, and I think that's why he goes that. You can find him on Instagram. He's very involved in treating obesity, treating hormonal problems through diet and exercise before you go the drug route. But what SteadyMD is they have physicians who are active people. So they have physicians who do CrossFit. So if you're a CrossFit athlete and feel that your physician doesn't understand you, there's somebody for you. There are physicians who run, physicians who do triathlons, physicians, both genders. There's a physician who works with individuals who are transgendered, lesbian, gay, and I'm going to butcher the terminology, so forgive me on that. Yeah. But what it is for people who have an active lifestyle and feel that either A, they can't get in to see a physician frequently, or B, I go and see my physician and say, yeah, I hurt my shoulder in the gym today. And the physician says, well, just don't go to the gym.
We've all been there, right? Where you know more about than the physician does about exercise science or.
Yeah. I mean, health insurance doesn't pay for it. I have very good health insurance, but it's $99 a month. There's a very good app, and I've been using it since, I believe, mid-June. And I've had a better relationship with this physician and the staff just because there's instant communication that I've had with other family practice physicians since I was a kid. Now, wow. I should say I'm a techno geek. So the technology for me, I teach online, I podcast, I'm talking to you on Zoom. So to me, would I like to have somebody face-to-face? I'd love to have somebody face-to-face, but I had the good fortune for moving to Live to interview another one of the physicians, Josh Emder, who's a runner. He's based out in Boulder. And his comment, or the statistic he gave me, was the average family practice physician has somewhere over 2,000 patients. So when you call to get in, they may say, hey, Doug, we can get you in next week. And you're going, yeah, but I'm coughing up green stuff. I want something today.
Yes.
The model, at least when I talked to Dr. Emder, was to cap each person or each physician for SteadyMD at about 400 patients.
Okay. And that's a reoccurring business model for them. So the revenue's there. Mm-hmm. It allows them to live their life. It seems like a win-win situation for everybody involved.
I've been very happy. I mean, I think it's the wave of the future if you can go with somebody who's 400 people versus 2,000 people. And I think also the advantage that it has, if I got off the phone with you and I used the app and texted and said, hey, I'm really sick, even if Dr. Spencer was not available, I asked about this, he would have notified me. So I know over the Labor Day weekend, I got a text message saying, hey, Dr. Spencer's on vacation. He's going to be checking his text app these 2 times during the days. If you have any other concerns, here's a number you can call, and one of his colleagues will be able to help you.
So this is amazing on so many ways, Ben. I'm going to take a quick aside to talk to the people listening. So if you're listening to this and you've probably sent me an email or you're thinking to yourself, geez, I'd love to work and do something that I love. However, I live in a small town. I can't connect with people. There's no one who understands me here, et cetera, et cetera. You and I have connected multiple times. We live in different areas. So that excuse eliminated. The next excuse, my job or what I do, I can't do the way I want to do it and travel, et cetera. Here you have doctors, physicians, very qualified and educated people who are doing telemedicine, medicine anywhere in the world. And so it brings up the question, what is everybody else's excuse, right? If anybody can now in this economy, in this world, really truly author their own story and work from and do anything that they want to. Here you are, an expert, a doctor, exercise physiologist, talking to people all over the world, teaching, which I think I want to drive home too, remotely at a very prestigious school, and doing things that you love, which I know some of those are. So anyway, just as an aside, if anybody didn't catch that and you're using the excuse of, oh, in my area, there's no one like me, or I can't do this particular job in my area, hopefully there are too many holes in your excuse now and you could just move forward.
I would also say that if you say there's nobody like it in my area, probably the most successful people are the people who are doing something either better than other people in the same field, or they're doing it differently. So if there's nobody in your area, that could be your niche.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's go back to, and I want to talk, you're so interesting because we could talk about the health and the body, which I want to dive deeply into, but in the interest of time, but you've also carved out a specific niche. You found that you like talking to people about health related subjects. So tell us real quickly about your podcast and how those came about.
So I've got two podcasts. I've got I can say international because I've interviewed a couple of people in Canada, New Zealand, and Singapore, called Moving to Live. And I've got another one called Fit Lab Pittsburgh. And to be honest, my original idea was only to have Moving to Live, which was to have a 2-part podcast interviews lasting somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes. So you could listen to it while commuting to work, while cooking dinner, while waiting for your kid to finish Little League practice. And the idea was the first part would tell the person's story. How did they get to where they are? And these people are movement professionals, some people you've heard of, some people you haven't. And the second part is what they do professionally. So I ordered a bunch of equipment on Amazon, and it came and it sat on my kitchen table, and I looked at it and said, shit, I don't know how to use this stuff. So I went out for a run with my dogs, and I'm not a Pittsburgh native. And Pittsburgh is geographically challenged in that we have lots and lots of valleys, hills. So that to get from one place to the other in the city often requires a bridge and or a tunnel. So the joke is people don't like to go through bridges and over tunnels.
Got it.
The other thing is Pittsburgh is a Rust Belt city. It's recovering. Technology is great. Education is great. There's huge numbers of medical professionals, but it's still not one of those things where movement is the norm. It's kind of, there are pockets of people doing it, but not everybody. So to get an idea for Moving to Live, to learn how to use the equipment, my thought process was, well, I'll go interview people in the Pittsburgh area who do something related to movement, whether they're personal trainers, whether they're physicians, whether they're nutritionists. I actually just interviewed yesterday 2 people who have a grass-fed beef business, again, because it relates to healthy food.
Sure.
And my thought was that was going to go away once I learned how to use the equipment. But what I found is one begets the other. And it started out, the ethos of both of them was movement, part of what makes your life complete. And I've really realized as I've talked to more people and I've had people tell me this is a great idea, I've realized movement is part of what makes your life complete. But most of us, when we look at movement, we look at it as an activity. It's like, okay, I'm going to eat breakfast. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Okay, here's 30 minutes that I'm going to carve out for movement. Mm-hmm. And if we could figure out ways to realize movement is a lifestyle, not an activity, I think it's going to have a lot bigger and a larger ranging effect on our lives and other people's lives. And by saying that, what I mean is it's literally, you pull into the shopping mall with your kids and most people drive around and look for the closest spot to park.
Yes.
Park way in the back, or right next to the fancy car that's taking up three parking spots. There you've moved maybe 2 or 3 minutes longer. You go to the airport, park a little farther away, and rather than taking the shuttle bus, if you're parking in long-term parking, spend 10 minutes and take a walk.
Yep. And walk before your flight, right? That's where a lot of people just sitting, waiting for 30 minutes to an hour to board rather than just walking.
And I think that's what all of the eye surgeries made me realize. Movement was really important. And maybe it's the fact that I realized that I knew a fair number of people or could cajole a fair number of people to talk to me about what they do. So other people could hear it and learn about movement and realize that movement shouldn't be the exception. it should be the norm. And I know you've done some traveling, and there are some countries where it's the norm just because the technology doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you obviously practice what you preach. I mean, here we are. We're both standing up, having a conversation. Are those blue blocking glasses for the screen light?
They have a blue tint. So they're not blue, they're prescription glasses with the blue tint for the screen light. I'm actually I'm actually also standing on a Pono Ono board, which is it's not a wobble board, but it's 4 air orbs. And the reason I'm standing on that versus a wobble board is I also have a Labrador at my feet, and I don't want to squash her nose.
Yeah, a good thing, right?
Exactly.
But these little things add up, and you're practicing what you're preaching. You're getting that movement in. And what I love about your philosophy, I don't like it, I love it, is you can fit these little micro movements in throughout the day. Take the stairs, skip. I remember when I was, I was 21. I've only worked in a big gym setting for less than a year. Then I was recruited by a certification company to work there. But I remember people would come in just pissed off, just absolutely pissed off that they had to park at the end of the parking lot, which couldn't have been more than 150 yards away. They would be yelling, screaming, like literally yelling at the front desk people. I didn't happen to be one of those people, but I would hear them as the head trainer. And then they would go to the locker room, change, and then get on the treadmill and walk for an hour.
Yeah. And I think the little things with movement, I mean, I think that's why I started the podcast, and the realization that you and I are standing at a desk and think it's normal, and I'm watching you and you're kind of swinging back and forth, and I'm probably bobbing around a little bit. Some people don't realize that these are practical, easy things. So along with the podcasts, FitLab Pittsburgh 3 times a week publishes on YouTube and Instagram what we call movement tips and lifestyle hacks, little 1-minute videos. We've got 190 of them, I think. We've been doing it for over a year. And some of them are little things that I thought were going to be, well, everybody knows this. For example, I did a little thing that, you don't wear underwear with your bike shorts. And I was amazed at the number of people said, oh, wow, I didn't know that. Little things like, here's a quick breakfast idea. So just like the movement, you take the little ideas. If you judiciously use social media to find information and find 3 or 4 go-to people or experts, ideally somebody who gets other experts, so they're not just saying, this is the way I do it, they're sharing the knowledge, then all of a sudden you realize it's in essence a virtual community. I'm not alone. There's other people struggling with the same thing. And hey, I don't have time for breakfast because I've got 3 kids, 2 dogs, and my husband has to work early. Well, here's a place that once a week posts quick, easy, healthy breakfast ideas.
That's awesome. So where can our listeners go after listening to this and find that information?
The easiest thing is if you look on either Twitter or Instagram at the @ FITLABPGH, they'll be able to link to the other podcast Instagram page, Moving to Live, or Twitter page. What we have pinned at the top of each of those is the most current podcast. So that'll take you to the website. So on the one hand, you say that's an indirect way, but on the other hand, at FitLabPGH is going to allow you to gain access to each of them.
Excellent. And what a great resource. And for those listening, having an expert who can filter out the noise, because there is so much noise in the fitness industry. It's amazing. And you and I have both been in it for a very long time, that can filter out the noise and give you quality information. And one of the things I like about your podcast, Ben, is it's not your dogma. You're not just saying, hey, look, here's the way you do it, period, end of story. You're allowing other people to share their opinions, which don't always match yours, and hear them out and have a dialogue and a conversation and allow their story to be heard. And that's in this day and age, that's truly remarkable.
I think one of the things that came out of it, I think the first or second person I interviewed for Moving to Live talked about knowledge silos.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it was consciously or unconsciously, but I've always tried to avoid knowledge silos. I think it's probably because my variety of background, having worked as an athletic trainer, having worked for orthopedic surgeons. And the advantage of my podcast and other podcasts is the fact that you get out of those knowledge silos. If you're only an aerobic person, you can learn about strength training. You can learn about mind body. You can learn about the effects of stress. So it's a big, if I can tell your listeners, if you're looking for good sources of information, look for somebody who doesn't only show pictures of themselves or talk about themselves, but rather interviews other people or reposts other people. What I found is the people who do the most sharing are the people who are most confident in what they do. So you can get good information from them and also the people that they share.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. You're spot on. And plus, what I've always told people is somebody who looks good with their shirt off only tells you that they know how to manipulate their body. And fitness and wellness can be, and usually are, two different things. They can be the same, but they usually are two different things. And the second thing is, to your point of interviewing other people, what that tells me about you, and I could be making this up, so correct me if I'm wrong, is that you like to learn and you're hungry for learning and you're open to continue your learning and education. Therefore, you ask questions of people, and therefore you're always expanding.
I think innately I'm a geek and want to learn more. And I think to some extent that's built in genetically. My dad went to law school at 73 or 74. My grandfather practiced law until he was 88. So I think there's just an innate curiosity of realizing I want to learn more. I want to learn more. And then the more you learn, the more you realize I don't know a whole lot.
I call that coming out of the teenage phase, right? In business or anything else. A teenager knows everything, and you get to a certain level of knowledge in any field, and all of a sudden you're like, crap, I really don't know anything.
You've got a son, you'll be cool for another 10 to 12 years, and then you won't know anything for 7 or 8. Then all of a sudden dad's going to know a lot.
Yep, exactly. I'm already trying to implant things in his mind that hopefully we'll skip and fast track that, but I'm a realist at the end of the day. So Ben, leaving the listeners with a few tips, here, things that you mentioned, little things you can do in everyday life, like parking the car far away, these little movement things you're standing on, not a wobble board, but a stability board of some kind to, which helps your joints and helps the fluidity of your discs, et cetera. What are some other things that people can do to not only help themselves look better, but just feel better throughout the day? Little micro improvements that they can make.
I think the biggest thing is find out what do you need to do, little things that you can control. I mean, to some extent, you may be in a job you don't like and you may be working to change that. But think, what are the day-to-day things that really make you happy? And if you can get those things in most days, that's going to improve your outlook of life. For example, for me, I mentioned a few minutes ago that I got to do something aerobic 5 or 6 days a week. And that may be excessive for some people. What I found for me is it's not that treadmill in the gym. It's getting outdoors, hopefully in the woods, either on a mountain bike or with my dogs. And I think if I had to pick one of those, the biggest thing for me that if I can most days of the week get out for, the magic point for me seems to be about 40 minutes with my dogs in the woods. Whatever thoughts or whatever bad things I was having, they always look better. They may not be improved, but they always look better. I've also found that I have some great ideas. That's where my podcast ideas came from, being out with the dogs. So that may be it for me. For you, it may be journaling for 20 minutes in the morning. Or maybe if you don't have 20 minutes, just say, I'm going to do it for 5 minutes, something that's realistic. Think about, we know that diet has a huge effect on quality of life and health and fitness. But think about, what are 1 or 2 things that you really enjoy that you can enjoy no matter what, and think about, is there anything healthy that you enjoy? And for me, just because I'm an N of 1, my thing is a couple of espressos in the morning.
Yeah.
To me, it's the ritual, of grinding the beans, of tamping the coffee, of watching the shot pull. To me, it's kind of, it's my morning. It starts my day off, and it's kind of the, So those things may not be possible for everybody, or they may not like that, but most of us have 1 or 2 things. Maybe it's just sitting there watching your cat wash itself, or maybe it's, you have a bonsai tree and you trim the bonsai tree. Just find 1 or 2 little things that you can do that no matter what's going on in your life, for this 5 minutes, you can focus or settle and not think about those external variables. And I suspect if you make a commitment to doing that, you'll notice afterwards, I feel a little bit better.
5 minutes of Zen. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. Well, Ben, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time and expertise, and we'd love to have you back on again if you'd be willing to do that, because there's so many topics that we didn't have time to touch on that I'd love. And I'd love to follow up with you and see how the ring works, but we can talk about that as well. So one more time for those listening in that want to follow you or know more about you, what is the best way?
Best way, so most of you are probably listening to this where you're driving. Think FitLab PGH, FITLAB PGH, put the @ symbol in front of it, and that'll allow you to access both FitLab PGH and Moving to Live. There's some really interesting interviews from people everywhere, from wheelchair athletes to nutritionists to Doug's partner, Eric Malzone.
Absolutely. Eric's a great guy. All right, Ben, thank you again for being with us, and we really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Doug. I always love talking to you.
At Author of Your Own Story, we believe in taking a holistic approach to your health, where you aren't just physically healthy, but your entire mind, body, and soul is operating at its most optimal level. To get started in creating holistic health, download our free holistic health checklist at authorofyourownstory.com/body-gift. And don't forget to be the author of your own story.